Final is in St. Louis, and that's where we find our Tom Leyden right now, nestled right under the world-famous arch. How are you, Tom?
Doing great, Butch. It's a beautiful day here in St. Louis. It's been beautiful the whole time we've been here, about 80 degrees, and kind of interesting that we're talking about hockey when it's that weather, but that's what the Stanley Cup Final is all about. When you're playing in June and it's hot out, you've had a good season.
Let's talk about Game 4. Let's talk about today. Bruins skated after the big 7-2 win. What's the biggest news to come out of today?
Well, quickly putting last night's win in the drawer and forgetting about it, because whether you win 10-0 or 1-0, it's just one win, and you've got to get 4 of them. So they're halfway home, and they understand that. And they also know that St. Louis really responded well in Game 2 in Boston, so they fully anticipate that the Blues are going to come out with their hair on fire tomorrow, hoping that they can come back to Boston with this series tied 2-2.
In Boston, it was Zdeno Chara with the injury. Matt Grzelcyk, of course, is still dealing with the concussion issues. Charlie McAvoy got hit with a puck last night. How is he?
Quick to deflect it. He said he's fine. He took it just above his left knee, kind of in his inner thigh. So he luckily was at the end of the game. He's had a night to rest. So he said without hesitation, he's fine. He'll be good to go tomorrow night.
All right, 3 games into this Stanley Cup Final, the Bruins are 2 wins away from a championship. Let's talk about some of the developing storylines. And I think the first one is the first line, Tom. We talked about this Saturday night, but when the chips are down, when their backs are against the wall, they deliver. What do you make of the first line's performance? Because it's there when they need it.
Yeah, and I think it's been Bruce Cassidy's slow and steady approach, because even before yesterday's game, he said, listen, they just need to get loose. And sometimes they get loose on a power play. And in fact, they got loose before the power play last night. But once they get it going, it's like a well-oiled machine that just needs to get churned up a bit. And they've done it so much throughout the postseason. Berge gets on the board early last night, but the power play was fantastic. I mean, they were 4 for 4 on 4 shots. That's all it took. So once these guys get going, it seems as though it's a snowball going downhill. And look out for anybody once they wake up that first line.
And speaking of snowball, I mean, Craig Berube took Binnington out of the game. My opinion, you take your goalie out of a Stanley Cup Final game, I mean, series over.
Yeah, I heard you say that last night, and I'm going to take the other side of that argument for this reason alone. It goes back to my first point, that it's just one game. And any good team that's gotten this far should have the ability to put that one game in the rearview mirror and move the focus towards the next game. Binnington's been fantastic. Don't forget, he is on home ice. He will be lifted up by his home fans. So I don't think it's series over because they pulled the goalie. I think that Binnington's probably going to come back and have one of his better games tomorrow, which leads us to the next topic, which is Tuukka Rask. I don't think we've seen a classic Tuukka Rask performance yet in this series. And I think each of the previous 3 series has been highlighted by at least one Tuukka Rask signature performance, and that's why he's the Conn Smythe Trophy favorite still at this stage. So that's still in the back pocket. It's almost like Game 3 was, okay, where's the first line? Game 4 might be, hey, where's Tuukka? Because it's coming. You know it's coming.
So let's talk about the Conn Smythe Trophy. And for non-hockey fans, it's a trophy given for the entire playoffs. It usually goes to the team that wins the Stanley Cup. But if not Tuukka, then who? Who's been the best player in these playoffs for the Bruins beside Tuukka that might even be in the conversation?
Well, you go back to that first line. I don't think anybody is, frankly. But if you want to add some other people to the mix, you got to add Bergeron because he's topping the scoring list. Marchand's right up there as well. He's gotten a couple cheapies with some empty netters. But, I mean, Charlie Coyle's not going to win the trophy, but he's been one of those invaluable cogs to this Bruins run that has made them advance as far as they'd advance. And he came up big last night with another goal, and that's been the story of his postseason. And all the guys who they acquired here towards the end of the season at the trade deadline. I mean, Nordstrom's been great. Johansson's been fantastic. Coyle's been contributing on a consistent basis. So you got to tip the cap to Don Sweeney and the team for putting together a really good team that has a lot of depth and a lot of people who could score from different lines.
Don Sweeney, Conn Smythe winner. There you go. I like the prediction on that one. There's 2 questions here, but I want to preface it. You're in St. Louis. We're not. You got a good taste of the atmosphere, the flavor there. It's a crazy, desperate city. First Stanley Cup Final in 49 years. Yet they're 5-6 at home. The Bruins, on the other hand, are 7-2 on the road in these playoffs. What up with that, Tom? If this crowd is supposed to spur them on, why do they have a losing record at home?
You know, I think the crowd is very fiery. I just am not a believer that home ice in the Stanley Cup playoffs means anything. I think a good team is going to win at home or on the road, and I think the Bruins are the better team in this series. I think they've shown that in this series already, and I think they'll show that again tomorrow. They seem to really bond when they're on the road. It's more of a business-like atmosphere. They enjoy the challenge. They enjoy the booze. They think that they can prove some people wrong if they win games on the road. And I think I would not be shocked, though, Butch. I'm not saying that the Bruins are going to come out tomorrow and win the game. I wouldn't be surprised if the Blues win the game. They are a desperate team, and when you have a good, desperate team at home in the playoffs, powered by the crowd that is very, very energetic, they got a good chance to win. If Binnington plays well, if the crowd's fired up, you look for the series to come back to Boston 2-2.
Well, I look for St. Louis to be desperate. They did respond in Game 2 on the road. Ironically, they have a better road record in the playoffs than they do at home. But this is going to be a tall task for them to win after what the Bruins did to them last night. Why does St. Louis win Game 4 if they do?
They win it because of the goaltending, and they win it by staying out of the penalty box. They've been ridiculously stupid in their decision-making and ending up in the penalty box. When you think about them challenging that call at the end of the first period last night, and the fact they lose that challenge, and now they got to sit somebody in the box. So not only do they concede the goal that made it 3-0, but they're going to start the second period on fresh ice, down a man, and the Bruins made him pay in less than a minute. And that's what good teams do. When opportunities present themselves, good teams capitalize on them, and that's what the Bruins have done. So now, are the Blues a good team? If they are, they better answer the bell tomorrow at home.
Some insight into the Bruins' road record. Let me give you my thoughts. I said this last night. I'll say it again and tell me what you think. Championship teams in all sports have a lot of things in common, but to me, winning on the road in the playoffs tells you all you need to know. And let's just go back to Boston in this calendar year. The Red Sox did it in New York, Houston, and Los Angeles. The Patriots had one of their greatest victories ever in their franchise in Kansas City in the AFC Championship game. And again, 7-2 on the road in these playoffs for the Bruins. I'm not going to be surprised if they dominate Game 4.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me either. I'm kind of leaning the other way based on what you've heard me say here over the last couple of minutes. But one thing I'll point out in that regard is I think it does go to the coaching staff. And David Backes, who's always so good to listen to, really tipped his cap to Bruce Cassidy. And he said, I don't want him to hear this, but I almost have to say it. It's amazing to me how many times he makes a change, a subtle change within a period, and then on that next shift or a couple shifts later, we see the puck in the back of the net, or a shift that changes the tone of the game. So I think they're very prepared. I think the coaching staff's done a great job knowing their opponent, and that makes a huge difference at this point of the season.
I think one of the differences, Tom, to finish up here, is the Bruins' third and fourth lines are better than St. Louis, as well as their first line, but their depth is unbelievable. And I'm going to point to one guy. Sean Corrali seems unstoppable at times, and he's a fourth-line guy on this team. Last night was a great example.
Yeah, and last night after the game, right as we were chatting on the Sports Wrap, his whole family and friends group was next to us sporting the Corrali 52 sweaters, and they were fired up because they know their guy just scored a goal in the Stanley Cup Final. It's the bit players, the guys further down the depth chart, that win you championships, and it's not just offensively, it's defensively, and it's that buy-in mentality that people are going to get in front of a puck going 100 miles an hour, and they're going to stop it. And look at Wagner, who was knocked out of the postseason because he took a puck on his arm, but guys appreciate what he did to get them here, and they know what they might do in the future might mean the Bruins raising the cup at the end of the series.
So let's finish with a prediction. I'm not afraid to pick against the Boston teams when I think they're going to lose, but I think last night changed everything. I think they're empowered, I think they win, and I think on Thursday night you get one of those rare chances for a Boston team to win a championship at home in Boston. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, it's a little different than I felt after they won that game when they were down 2-1 against Columbus. When they were down 2-1 and they even that series, I thought they were unstoppable. It was at that point that I thought that the Bruins were a championship contending team for real. I feel a little bit differently because we're 2 rounds deeper into the playoffs, and I think that St. Louis has earned their way here. And I think they will play a little bit more intelligently tomorrow, and I do think it comes home to Boston 2-2, which means that you're going to be making a trip out here to St. Louis for a possible clincher in Game 6.
You'll have to give me directions to the Arch.